World War III.
Yeah, that one's been fucked up.
So we are here on Rumble on Russell Brand's channel, right? So he's off. I don't know if he's off YouTube completely, but
They demonetized
Hasn't posted
him.
in a
well,
while.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Dang, they did.
So I can see him, going over to the free speech platform and, dropping some free speech things. What I don't want to happen is, though, we get demonetized because of this, guys. So if this is, I ain't gonna say this is a risk. I mean, I don't know why he got demonetized. I mean, we do know why, but like,
why?
He was just posting. I think he was kind of
He's
exposing
exposing
too much.
Then they hit him with them accusations.
So it'll be kind of risky if we drop the stuff on YouTube, guys. I don't know though, but we're gonna see, guys. Look, we're here to take the risk to show you guys what Russell Brand is dropping on Rumble if you don't have Rumble, guys. So yeah, him and Vivek on this. They're talking about the Great Reset that's about to happen. I think Iran and all that crazy stuff going on right now. But we're gonna get into it. I don't know. Let's go and get into it. But guys, we are dropping multiple parts because this is an hour, guys. So yeah.
Ain't he part of the woke movement too?
I mean, it's different, bro.
But when he talks, he doesn't sound like.
No, he's not like
overly
LGBTQ woke.
Yeah.
He's just like, I'm go outside in the nature type woke.
That's what he seems like.
Yeah, that's definitely him. That's definitely him.
He said that alphabet mafia woke.
Let's get to it.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
I don't know if you two gonna like
In this video, you're going to see the future.
Bro, Vivek is like the hardest working man on the planet right now.
Always doing something.
Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thank you for joining me for Stay Free with Russell Brand for an extremely special show. Today we have an extended interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, Republican presidential candidate and outsider who could become increasingly significant as the travails of Trump increase. If Donald Trump is taken out by the state, where does that leave Vivek Ramaswamy? Does that mean he's next in line to be taken out as an outsider? Or does that mean that he will elevate to candidacy? Let me know what you think in the chat right now. In this first part of the conversation, we're going to be talking about Dave Chappelle and Dave Chappelle's role as a free speech advocate in shifting times. We talk about Israel-Palestine and how you handle that as the President of the United States. Of course, we talk about free speech as always. Now, this interview was pre-recorded and you can join us live when we make that kind of content. If you are an awakened wonder, press the red button. You can join interviews live. We do meditations. We're planning a movement so that we can form new communities as the apocalypse apparently unfolds before our very eyes. How does independent media become independent politics? You tell me, because without you, we are nothing. Thank you for elevating your consciousness above the level of fear. Thank you for being willing to open up the belly of the beast, chop the head of the serpent, and move forward in a glorious new movement together. We are going to have to change politics pretty radically if we're going to change the world, and perhaps Vivek Ramaswamy is part of the solution. Let me know what you think in the chat now. Of course, the first 15 minutes will be available on YouTube, but after that, we'll be flying on wings of freedom to free speech's sweet home, Rumble. Here's Vivek Ramaswamy.
The truth.
Vivek, thanks for joining us.
It's good to see you, man.
Vivek, this cannot be an easy time to have off-the-cuff, spontaneous conversations about politics. When the world's best comedians, like Dave Chappelle, find themselves unable to appease an audience with regard to a subject that you've spoken very boldly and bravely on, the escalating crisis in the Middle East and its unique position now as part of a cluster of wars that you might call a kind of omni-war, an emergent global war. And I wonder if you can comment on that. And I wonder if you can let me know really what you feel, Vivek, about the entry into an already fractured, sensorial and conflagratory cultural space, the mother of all controversial issues. An issue where it seems that it's not enough to say, well, we just want violence to end, we want war to end, where people across the spectrum on that conflict want outspoken advocacy and condemnation of their opponents. How are you coping with that as you make such great progress in your own campaign to be the Republican nominee?
Well, Russell, I think it's become increasingly clear that I am a lone voice in the Republican Party standing out against World War III and against war more broadly. So I know you're on the other side of the pond, but as you know, I'm running for U.S. president. So I'm looking at this from a U.S. perspective, and I don't think we should apologize for that. My job as U.S. president, if I'm elected, my moral obligation is to the American people. Now, even in America now, that is a controversial thing to say, which is interesting to understand what's lurking beneath the surface of that. And so I look at all of the conflicts emerging now as somewhat related in escalating the risk of World War III. Think about the funding package that's making its way through U.S. Congress now. Biden has called for a $106 billion foreign aid package. The majority of that is still directed at Ukraine, $61 billion on top of the billions and hundreds of billions we've spent escalating that war in a way that I don't think advances anybody's interests except for a select few who stand to benefit from this conflict. And I think that itself is a disaster that is already, and I'm going to get to the Middle East and the Israel point in a second, but the context is really important here, Russell, is already against the backdrop of major conflict brewing by way of proxies between the U.S. and Russia, between the West and Russia. We're driving Russia further into China's hands with the Russia-China alliance. We have a no-win war that, if you look back now, it's been confirmed in recent days. Ukraine could have agreed to terms of peace. They were willing to a long time ago, except for the U.S., and also your guy, Boris Johnson, goading them further into war. That's where we are today. And then this general logic that just because Putin is bad, that means Ukraine is good. That's a false premise for continuing this war. I mean, this is a country in Ukraine that has banned 11 opposition parties, that has outright consolidated all media into one state media arm. You know, there are familiar feelings that happens in the West more broadly, but that's happening here in Ukraine. You have a country that has effectively threatened not to hold its elections, but for U.S. forking over more money. And by the way, occupied regions of the Donbass, like Luhansk and Donetsk, that are Russian-speaking, many of which don't view themselves even as really part of Ukraine, have not been represented in the Ukrainian parliament. Against this backdrop, we're escalating our way into major conflict between nuclear powers and driving Russia further into China's arms. It's nonsense. So that's why I've called for a clear, fair, rational path to peace in Ukraine. And I've laid out, and we can go into it, the terms of what that deal would look like. But then right around that same time, now you see the escalation towards a possible broader regional conflict in the Middle East. And I say this against the backdrop of what Hamas did to Israel. It was wrong. It was barbaric. I said it at the time. I say it now. It was wrong. And Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself and its own national self-existence. But now we're seeing a cascade where I hope I'm wrong about this, Russell. I really do, but I can see it with clarity. Here's what I fear is about to happen. Israel goes south into this ground invasion with Gaza without any clear objectives. That then causes Hezbollah, they've said that this is their red line, to attack Israel from the north, right when Israel's mired in the south. That's a two-front conflict. No way the U.S. doesn't then get involved. The U.S. is involved. That then triggers Iranian-backed militias through the Middle East who've said that U.S. involvement is their red line to hit targets. The Houthis in Yemen have said it. The Badr Brigade in Iraq has said it. The U.S. has its largest embassy in Baghdad. Now we're mired in a large-scale conflict in the Middle East. We've done that before. We don't want to do it again yet.
We could pause
yet again, we are on the path.
He kind of too late because the U.S. just bombed the Iranian.
I don't know
Syria.
Syria.
Yeah,
It was
Syria in Iran?
No, it wasn't in Iran. It was in Syria, but they invaded Iranian militants in Syria.
Oh, wow.
Let's see if this is confirmed information. This is Fox News, guys.
I've heard this sounds like huge news.
Sean, we can report, based on senior military sources, that U.S. warplanes have carried out airstrikes tonight inside Syria against Iranian proxy forces. We don't know the number of strikes. We were told earlier today to expect that perhaps F-15s and F-16s would be involved in the airstrikes, but we don't have confirmation yet about how many warplanes, but those strikes have been carried out. I'm told it is in response to the more than dozen strikes against U.S. bases. The message is a clear message designed to Iran and its proxy forces to stop carrying out these drone and rocket attacks against U.S. bases. But I'm told that the planes have safely left the area and that the airstrikes are complete at this time. They were targeting multiple locations inside Syria and Iranian proxy forces, Sean.
Okay, I got a question. And what messed me up about this is like, why are you bombing Iranians in
Well, they're bombing
Syria?
Syria. Yeah, what is proxy
I think
forces?
they were bombing their.
I think they're like a militant group.
I think they were bombing their. I don't want to say their bases, but they seem
So
like they were like
how the U.S. got bases in other countries, type like they had a base there. Because what is a proxy? I don't know what the hell that is.
I think it's the militant. It's probably like some militant group.
Everybody seems to be confused on Twitter, so we're not the only ones confused. I said, "Wait, what?" Because it did sound like they had to do that because they were spying on them. It sounded like it didn't seem like it was that bad at first, but I don't know how bad.
Syria is where ISIS was, isn't it?
Where the hell is
that's
Syria?
over there in that area.
It's in the Middle East.
Yeah, no, I just want to look.
I think Syria right next to Iran. That's what makes it crazy. Because they said Iran supposed to be a part of this kind of was help Hamas.
Militias through the Middle East who've said that U.S. involvement is their red line to hit targets. The Houthis in Yemen have said it. The Badr Brigade in Iraq has said it. The U.S. has its largest embassy in Baghdad. Now we're mired in a large-scale conflict in the Middle East. We've done that before. We don't want to do it again. Yet again, we are on the path to potentially doing it. Civilian casualties will mount in Gaza. International allies will then turn their back on Israel. And even if Israel does succeed in toppling Hamas, what then? After Al-Qaeda, you got ISIS. After Hamas 1.0, you're probably slated for Hamas 2.0. And then this rolls out the red carpet, of course, for then China to be the ultimate winner of this and go after Taiwan while the U.S. is mired in conflicts from Ukraine to the Middle East, some of which have actually driven our already adversaries further into China's hands. And that's a path to World War III. And I don't think that that's an exaggeration. So I know that took a little while for me to explain because I think these things have to be looked at in the context of one another for the risk of major conflict. Dare I call it World War III. And so my job as the U.S. president, I have clear paths, a clear vision of how to keep us out of World War III. And yet the shocking part is I am the only person in the Republican Party offering a clear stance on opposing World War III, a clear stance against this $106 billion aid package that Biden has proposed for wars that I think are not on track to advance American interests. And it's precisely in times like these. I mean, you brought up, what does this have to do with the Jon Stewart piece? Well, it's during times of crisis that we need free speech and open debate the most. You know, it's easy and fashionable now to go back and say, oh, the Iraq war was bad and Afghanistan was bad. Yes, it was. But that's easy for people to say now. That's lazy almost. Because many of those people back then were the ones calling for that war. They won't admit it. They hope you weren't listening to them 20 years ago. Well, the harder part is, remember why we got into those wars. They said after 9/11, shut up, sit down, do as you're told, follow the plan. Well, it's moments like these that effectively you're being asked to do the same thing as an American or otherwise. And that's the real danger of how we got into those wars. So easy to sit in an armchair and say, oh, we shouldn't have been in Iraq. Yeah, I said it at the time and I say it today too. The harder part is standing up with conviction when everybody else surrounding you is saying, skip the debate and march straight into that war again. And I'm refusing to comply. To the contrary, I'm looking to lead this country in a manner that actually speaks with the spine, in a manner that other Republicans seem, frankly, too afraid of their own shadow to be able to do.
Yes, Vivek, I think that's important.
Well said,
and
man.
it is extraordinary how people are willing to mobilize condemnation of, if not entirely latent, conflicts due to the ongoing consequences of many of those actions, in particular across that region, certainly willing to speak out with a kind of advocacy and confidence that was, as you point out, absent at the time. One aspect or a few aspects of your answer I'd love to follow up on. You're quite right. It was Boris Johnson of the UK that interrupted the potential peace deal between Zelensky and Putin at a time when a different pathway was clearly open. And that is curious. Another thing I want to touch upon is the bundling together financially, but perhaps even ideologically, these conflicts. When you start to create aid packages of $100 billion, as you point out, the majority of which goes to Ukraine, a small amount goes to the conflict in the Middle East, some even preparatory aid for Taiwan, you start to create, I think, a mental image that these wars are somehow conflated with one another instead of discrete, distinct conflicts, each of which has to be understood in its own unique context. And at some point, I would have to agree with you. I mean, and how can this be a controversial thing to say? A pathway towards peace has to be considered, particularly for you as a potential US president. And just to let you know that 50% of our audience, at very least, are in the United States of America. That's generally speaking where people consume our content. What I'd also like to comment on is the way that you mapped out that trajectory, how the escalation of a Middle Eastern conflict in particular, even without taking a side ideologically, all of us have a responsibility to look at, hold on a minute, and then Hezbollah, hang on a minute, and now US, now Iran. Whoa, where are we going with this? It seems that we are heading towards World War.
I've heard of it before.
Y'all know what I think of when I hear Hezbollah. I think
They have to do the
They
Hamas.
said Hezbollah, not Hasbullah.
I know that's what I think of.
No, that's what I think of too.
I think of him.
But like, what is Hezbollah? You misspelled it.
Is the leader of Hamas.
You misspelled it. It's H-E-Z, I think.
H-E-Z?
Yeah, Hezbollah.
Political party.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
What country? In Lebanese Shia Islamist political party.
I don't even know what the hell that is.
Shia is the type of Islam. Shia and Shiite. I don't know what.
The
like,
Shiites.
country
That's a
that
secret
is.
U.S. war in
Shiites.
Libya.
I've heard of them.
Yeah,
Isn't
Shia,
that the,
Shiite.
In the Bible.
Yeah,
Palestine flag right there?
yeah, it is. Oh, is that the country of Lebanon?
Yeah, I'm assuming.
Is
yeah.
that
That's what it says. That's where it was founded.
Oh, in Lebanon? I'm pretty sure Israel was doing airstrike, dropping bombs on Lebanon.
Boy, that's literally their political sign right there.
With that chopper.
Holding up a gun that's made from some.
That is literally their flag.
Well,
That's scary. But I saw that somewhere that
And
I don't know
Biden
if it's
just
true.
said, let's fund it all. That's insane.
maybe he
Okay.
likes being entertained or something.
He's on the beach. What happened today? How many did they get?
And he's finna take all the ARs away.
Shit, no, he not.
not mine.
I'm finna go get me a.
Come and take it. That's that flag. I
Out
see
that trajectory, how the escalation of a Middle Eastern conflict in particular, even without taking a side ideologically, all of us have a responsibility to look at, hold on a minute, and then Hezbollah, hang on a minute, and now US, now Iran. Whoa, where are we going with this? It seems that we are heading towards World War. It seems that if you're able to make that analysis, perhaps people that are heavily advocating for further expenditure and more aggression for this conflict and others have also got an idea that that's a potential outcome. Is it conceivable, Vivek, that they know that this can lead to at least an escalating conflict, because there's no doubt that that will happen, but potentially even something that is global, and that they can accommodate that vision and maybe even want it? Or do you think they just haven't thought it through?
Well, it depends on who you're talking about. Different people fall into different parts of that category. And I'm sitting in a room here in Iowa in the middle of the campaign trail. I can just make sure you can hear me well, right, Russell?
Perfect.
My boy, Warcher.
Good. So, listen, I think you raise an important point. Even if you look this morning, I wake up to Mitch McConnell, and this is not a Republican versus Democrat point in the U.S. I want you all to really understand this. This is not the traditional partisan conflict that they try to shoehorn into red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat. No. It's a bipartisan establishment in the U.S. in both the majority of the electeds in the Republican and the Democrat Party that are marching us towards this war. These parties that otherwise disagree on everything, they'll bash heads or pretend to bash heads on everything here at home, on some domestic cultural war. And, every Republican likes to be more outraged than the next about men swimming in women's swimming competitions, which I'm against too. But it's a pissing contest to show outrage. But when it comes to the stuff that matters on foreign policy, they pretend like they're opposed to the other side. They're really on the same team. Man. Mitch McConnell called these conflicts interconnected. So I want to say something about a path to world war, Russell, is the way you describe these conflicts may actually affect the way the conflicts themselves work. I mean, that's the relationship between diplomacy and war. And so seeing these conflicts inherently as having to be funded together or not, I think actually escalates the risk of correlation in how we potentially, God forbid, end up in World War III. Now, your question is, are there vested interests or is this just stupidity? I think there are elements of both. Some people absolutely have their head in the sand. It's amazing that even many of the politicians that will criticize me for lack of foreign policy experience, I don't think they could tell you which provinces in eastern Ukraine are even occupied. I don't think they could tell you what happened in 2014 that led us to the history of now. They're just puppets, listless vessels, to borrow a term of Ron DeSantis, in terms of reciting the slogans of their super PAC puppet masters. They don't even know what they're saying for some of them. For others of them, they absolutely are not dumb people, but they stand to benefit from it. The Pentagon's budget this year, that's the, here in the U.S., for those of you who don't know the Pentagon, that's the military branch of the military of the umbrella for all of the military branches and organizations where the decisions are made by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the people who run the military. That's the way to think about it. The Defense Department, the Pentagon's budget, half of it, 50% of it's like an $850 billion budget is going to defense contractors this year. And I don't want to go off on this side tangent too far, but it's worth just understanding the context. Back in 1993 in the United States, under President Bill Clinton, so now there's a Democrat, the defense secretary convened a meeting of all of the defense contractors. Back then it was like 50 some odd defense contractors. And the government, I mean, this sounds like the stuff of conspiracy theory. It's not. It's just plain old mundane reality. Coordinated for these defense contractors to start merging with one another. So they consolidated some 50-odd defense contractors over the years into 5 defense contractors. Now just take a look at the cost of one of the Stingers.
Okay, y'all know what a defense contractor is, though?
They make military parts.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Provides products and services to government's military, yeah.
Yep.
So basically you're saying 50 of them came together and those companies make money for war. So basically what I think he's about to get to is they want the war.
You know who is the military's pistol defense contractor? 6 Hour.
Can you?
Pretty sure
do they got a stock for that?
Yeah, they got a stock for all of this.
Hell yeah, it's a stock for all that shit.
Yeah.
I was thinking about joining too. Just fucked
Better
up.
get on Robin Hood, big bro.
Already on. I was even told to invest in Boeing. The people that make the plane. Boeing. I said Boeing.
Contractors to start merging with one another. So they consolidated some 50-odd defense contractors over the years into 5 defense contractors. Now just take a look at the cost of one of the Stingers. That's a shoulder-bearing weapon, effectively, that's born today, and we're sending them to Ukraine. It is up from like $25,000 back then to many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even if you adjust for inflation and the cost of technology equipment improvement, that's an over 7x increase for the cost of the exact same thing after you saw the government coordinated consolidation of the contractors to the military, many of whom are then in bed with that same government. So yes, what Dwight D. Eisenhower called the military industrial complex, it is alive. It is real. You look at the other candidates in the Republican presidential field. I mean, one of my competitors in this race is a woman by the name of Nikki Haley. She is somebody who, after her short stint at the UN, which she uses to brandish as her foreign policy experience, her real foreign policy experience came when her family afterwards exploits those UN connections and government connections and otherwise to start, you guessed it, a military contracting business. You guessed it, to join the board of Boeing, which she did special favors for back when she was a governor of South Carolina. So my litmus test is if you are making money off your time of government connections, and worst category of all, making money off of war or the path to war, you are disqualified from being the commander-in-chief. And yet we live in a world right now where the establishment, from the media to both political parties to the super PAC puppet masters, label that foreign policy experience and then push us further in that direction into war. These are the mistakes that took us into places like Iraq. We're making those same mistakes all over again. So are there cynical forces at work, people who stand to make money off of this? Absolutely. And are they exploiting others in their own party to then say, some of whom are too uneducated or undereducated on these issues, to then come along and compliantly follow the plan? Yes. So it's both, Russell, is the answer. And I think that is why they are allergic. I mean, they're having an anaphylactic reaction to an outsider like me. I just give you a couple examples. I'm not a person who spins up victimhood narratives and cries about it. To the contrary, I'm going to show up and I think we're going to win this thing. But just to give you a sense for what type of allergic reaction, at first they said, oh yeah, young guy, a little bit different. It's a cute little addition to the race, and we can brandish that as a nice little trinket for the Republican Party. But now it turns out deep into the race, here I am. They're doing everything in their power to shut me up. I mean, you turn on mainstream media on a given day, you see the treatment that I'm able to get right now for my contrarian foreign policy views here to keep us in peace rather than in war. That's a cardinal sin right now, and you can see the establishment in both parties coming for me. Super PACs, those are the cancer on American politics, the farce where they say there's limits on how much you can contribute to a campaign. It's a lie. There are no limits on how much the multi-billionaire class, frankly, that donates to both parties, is donating, in this particular case, to Republican potential candidates, propping them up. There's closed-door summits where they're deciding which candidate they're going to put up against Trump. I'm not invited to those, but the Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley's of the world are sparring and begging these people, licking their boots for money as part of the corrupt system. And then you see the kinds of things that are happening, even at events that I'm going to. This was one I haven't talked about publicly, but I'm here in Iowa on this trip just a few days ago. I'm going on stage, and everybody else is speaking at this event, right? Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott. I'm speaking. We get up on the back of on a stage in a room full of people in Iowa. Literally, I can see it on my timer. It's still like 30 seconds left before we go off, just for me, not for any other candidate. And I mentioned some of these foreign policy views in that speech. The music starts playing. Like, it's literally, they've got like blaring outgoing music, like I was supposed to walk out. I just stayed on stage for the full song. It was enjoyably awkward, but I wait till that finishes, and then I'm going to finish my speech and make sure people hear what I have to say. But this is not going according to the plan of the establishment. If a guy is defecting from the Republican Party right now in the United States, their goal is to suffocate this. They don't want debate on the merits, because we win on the debate on the merits. What should we be spending our money on? National defense. Protect your own borders. I think that'd be good for Israel. Protect its own borders. But my job is to run for U.S. president. Protect our own borders. I think it'd be good if the U.S. didn't economically depend on China as much anymore. Onshore production to this country. But in the meantime, avoid catastrophic World War III, which is otherwise what we're barreling forward into. And that's a foreign policy agenda that apparently the Republican Party, the Democrat Party alike, don't want an insurgent candidate to actually state in public. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And I think that's the first step to keeping us out of wars that don't advance our interest, is actually embracing more speech, not less speech, more free speech and open debate. And it's when they tell you to shut up that you have to actually grow the spine to actually be more vocal than ever. That's our best chance to keeping our way out of this major conflict.
I can see why there would be an appetite to censor you with music or with not including you in super PAC conventions, because you are an innovative and discursive thinker, and in my reckoning, precisely what's required within a Republican Party that elsewise risks being captured by the same kind of militarist interests that have conventionally held sway, as you've explained beautifully, Vivek, over both parties. When it comes to the historic conflict in between Israel and Palestine now, of course, I have sympathies to all of the parts.
Bro, they both talk like they're reading books, bro.
But they both talk so like fast without messing it. It's like you have to like
some of the shit Russell Brand said be going over my head.
They're just
so the articulation is crazy.
Yeah, both of them.
They got the gift of the gab.
It's like reading two books.
Literally.
He's directly involved and suffering as a result of that horrific war. There's no question that throughout the history of that region, or at least certainly the relatively modern history, that United Kingdom interests, corporate interests, US interests have made conflicts in that region a lot worse, precisely because of the military-industrial complex relationships and the ability that energy companies and the military-industrial complex have had to assert and exert influence over American and, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, UK foreign policy. What's striking at this time, and perhaps the way that you say super PACs are set up and elections are sewn up and favoured political candidates are shut out, or people that are willing to speak out against the establishment, speak out against censorship, speak out against wars that have not been correctly contemplated are shut down, is perhaps because of the size and scale of the influence of this awful monopoly that you just described that collapsed from 50 organizations to just 5. And you're right, the relationships of potential opponents with military-industrial complex companies should mean that they forego inclusion in any race for office of the nature that you are currently pursuing. What I feel, Vivek, very strongly is that there potentially now the centrist political class, the kind of neocon candidates that are visible on both sides of the aisle, as opposed to the more radical, sometimes demagogic, innovative, charismatic figures that are emerging that previously presumably would have been in the independent space, and in the case of RFK are perhaps the only chance that US politics and therefore global politics have of pursuing a trajectory that seems to, by my reckoning, include the potential of world war as a favourable outcome, as it's the kind of crisis that would permit the type of controls many believe we saw piloted during the pandemic era. It facilitates censorship. It facilitates lockdown. It facilitates the closing down of dissent. Do you feel that if we have an election between party stooge candidates, a Biden and whoever you would nominate as a stooge within your own party, that the advance towards war is inevitable because we'll be denied the possibility for proper conversations? Is America, and indeed the world's only hope, to start considering outsider candidates that are willing to speak out against their parties and to speak out against the kind of narratives that at the moment, it seems astonishing to me, aren't being questioned? The possibility of alliance between China and Russia, terrifying. The possibility of limitless escalation in the Middle East, terrifying. The fact that we're bundling together funding without thinking about it. Not to mention the fact that the military-industrial complex and America, as essentially their agent, sells arms to 57% of the autocracies in the world. And even, it's potentially true, and I'm sure you're aware of the CIA whistleblower that said maybe even Hamas's weapons were American-made. In office, what would you do to match the invective of your campaigning to ensure that the military-industrial complex doesn't have that role in the world, given the importance of it and the power of the MIC in American political life? It could be argued, many would argue, they're more powerful than either the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. They dictate foreign policy. Are you willing to oppose that and prevent arms being sent to autocratic nations and to stand up against those kind of organizations and their current...
autocratic nation?
I don't know.
Autocratic is like they have one party, right?
What's it called? Monarchy. I keep saying it now.
Monarchy.
A monarchy, yeah. So all them Middle Eastern countries with princes and kings. A lot of countries in the Middle East
I don't think autocracy and monarchy are the same.
It's not. I think it's the same thing. It's like a dictatorship, ain't it?
Can we Google that? Can we check that?
It don't even look like Vivek be sweating.
What's the definition?
Yeah, one person with absolute power.
Oh. I guess that would be a monarchy. I guess that would be a monarchy.
Wait, you said one person in power?
Yeah, one person with absolute power.
A dictatorship.
Like North Korea.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So wouldn't a monarchy be like he dies and another one steps up, then he dies and another one steps up?
It used to be the king, yeah.
Yeah, but I
that's
don't think
when
like in the UK and all that, don't they stop king? But he don't like actually.
No,
they're just royalty.
Yeah, there's no power.
Yeah,
that is weird.
It's just.
Actually,
that's like one thing I like about the US.
They're like the Kardashians.
They're like a figurehead.
I was told if you get charged in the UK, it's you against the queen. You know how it's like you against the state here? It's you against the queen.
That's crazy. I didn't know that monarchy and autocracy were the same.
But why Vivek? You ain't never seen him sweating, bro. Like a robot.
This is my first
time.
He
don't even look like he just be cooking. Like he just be thinking. Like he just sits there.
Yeah, man.
Like he just for the say the coldest shit you ever heard, bro.
Influence. Now, if you're watching this anywhere other than Rumble, Vivek Ramaswamy is about to comment on what he calls, this is his phrase, and I don't know if it's a fair phrase to use. Let me know if you agree. What he calls the Biden family and their criminal enterprises. If you want to hear
Just
Vivek
stop right
Ramaswamy
here.
talk
That's a
about that
perfect stop.
and how it relates to the
I thought
current
he was gonna
Ukraine-Russia
ask the
conflict,
question. I thought that-
click
He did
the
ask the
link in the
question, but he said
description
he
and
paused
join
tells
us
you
there.
I mean, so you hit on a really important point, actually, which is the way in which we're often funding both sides of these conflicts and somebody else is making money off it. It reminds me of Times Square, New York. There was this guy that was selling, the guy he was selling an Israel flag and a Palestine flag to whoever wanted to buy it. It's interesting that guy in Times Square was making money from selling the flags. People are buying from both sides of them. But it's not that different than the military-industrial complex. Even if you think about a conflict that nobody else, for whatever reason, seems to have any other interest in. It's interesting how the good versus evil shows up in Russia versus Ukraine, but not in a different part of the Russian periphery in what's going on in Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I'm not advocating U.S. military involvement there at all. But it is interesting how nobody talks about how 120,000 Christians are being displaced in the Nagorno-Karabakh region where Armenians live back to Armenia as Azerbaijan's literally just rolled in and invaded. But part of the uncomfortable fact is that the U.S. has made for special exemptions, that has sold and transferred arms, people making money off it, U.S. allies too, have armed Azerbaijan. And so it's pervasive, this problem that you described. And I know it's self-serving for a guy like me to say, no, this is why it takes an outsider, insurgent, anti-establishment candidate to win. Like this is an electoral pitch. But I just think factually, me or somebody, it's got to be the case to be able to break this system. Now, the reason I'm able to do it is that, and it's sad that it works this way. It really is. I wish it weren't this way. But it's just a law of nature, Russell. It's like a principle of physics. This may be more immutable than some principles of physics. Okay, we went from Newtonian physics to, an Einsteinian view to, let's say a post-Einsteinian view today, string theory. So even those things change. This one doesn't change. Every politician dances to the tune of their biggest donor. Certainly in the U.S., it's like a law of nature. And in my case, that biggest donor is me. I'm 38. I've lived the full American dream. I've founded multi-billion-dollar companies. And so I don't want to be somebody else's circus monkey. But unfortunately, that is what it takes. It's not a system where anybody can step up and do this. I wish it were. But it doesn't work that way. Politics is mother's milk. It is money. And so one of the ways I'm able to do this, even getting shut out by the establishment media and otherwise now, it's one thing if I'm anti-woke and against the cult of racialism and transgenderism and even against some of the climate statements. Okay, well, that started to cross into really third rail territory. But now opposing these wars, that was the ultimate trigger that shuts me out of the mainstream. So I'm spending time reaching people in roomfuls of 50, 60 people, 100, 200 people at a time in places like Iowa, where I've been in the last few days. And my bet is that there's still some last vestige of the system where we, the people, can actually decide who governs rather than having it decided in the back of palace halls, which is how it was done in old world England. But it's a myth to say that somehow that's not how it's done in modern America. That's mostly how it's done in modern America, but there are slivers where we can exploit the crack. And what I see is ordinary people across this country, they do not want to go to war. Especially people in my generation. I'm 38. We grew up into the government lying to us about Iraq and Afghanistan. $6.5 trillion. See, the U.S. has a $33 trillion national debt problem. By the way, people forget that when they're signing up and sneezing $100 billion here, $100 billion there. How about the backdrop of the fact that we're basically bankrupt to the tune of $33 trillion. But of that $33 trillion, $6.5 trillion was attributable just to Iraq and Afghanistan. And more than the money even. Thousands upon thousands of our sons and daughters in this country, people my age and my generation, lives sacrificed that we will never get back. We're on track to repeat those same mistakes all over again.
No.
When I'm in roomfuls of people here, of actual citizens of this country, nobody wants to see that happen. And yet the people who they've elected to office through that broken, corrupted system are taking steps decisively to march us and make sure that same thing happens all over again. And I just think that now is the time to debate these questions, right? So let's just go into, for example, the Israel case, which you raised. There's a couple of different separate questions that I think we ought not conflate. Right, on one question is the certain people will raise humanitarian questions or questions of proportionality or whatever. I'm not even focused on that. Put that to one side. I think Israel does have the right to defend itself. Absolutely. Others may disagree with me on that. Fine. I'm on this side of the question. Israel as a nation absolutely has the right to defend itself. But I'm asking a different question, which is the one that they're actually even more keen to suppress within the Republican Party. Who says that this ground invasion is even going to be a good idea for Israel on its terms of national self-defense? Who said this is somehow foreordained to succeed? I think there are a lot of reasons to say it would not succeed. And that even if it does succeed nominally, what comes after Hamas? That should not be beyond the pale to ask that question.
That's what
should not be
I
beyond the
said.
pale to ask, how the heck did that security breach? How the heck did that intelligence failure happen in the first place as well? Those should be basic questions that are addressed now to say the money saved on a ground invasion, might that be better spent securing Israel's own border? Just as we in the United States should be asking that question. I went to the southern border of the U.S. just a week and a half ago.
Who was there?
I went to the northern border 2 weeks ago. If that can happen in Israel, that can happen here in the United States.
told me on the plane.
And yet the irony is the same establishment that has led us into foreign wars from Iraq to Afghanistan to otherwise has done nothing to protect this homeland. You know, this woman by the name of Nikki Haley, she's actually calling for the Department of Defense in the U.S. I'm not making this up. I was here in Iowa at the same time. She's calling for a Department of Offense. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Now, think about just, I want you to use this. I could care less for this particular individual.
She's trying to scum.
She's a symptom of a deeper cancer in American politics. And the donor class is now propping her up. The mainstream media has decided that she should be the one opposing Donald Trump. Just think about this for a second. This is somebody who's saying the Department of Defense, which has badly failed to defend the American homeland, which is as vulnerable as it's ever been, is calling for, she's saying the quiet part out loud, make it a Department of Offense. And by the way, this is the person who, after her short stint at the UN, started, or her family certainly did, a military contracting business, made millions, went from being personally in debt to being a rich person, 8 million some odd bucks made in the short time after the UN, joining the board of companies like Lockheed Martin, and then now literally calling for a Department of Offense instead of a Department of Defense. These people are bloodthirsty.
Yes.
They're rooting for war. What do these people
did say
screech?
that.
She's screeching, finish them, finish them.
off. She did say
That's a
that.
slogan from Mortal Kombat, in case people forgot. That's a video game. Finishing as though that's a model for American foreign policy. Finish who? They hide behind the smokescreen of saying they might mean Hamas without a clear strategy of what comes after Hamas. But actually, it's not what they mean. Finish them is purposefully vague. Finish who? It is the vague, nebulous enemy. Do they mean Iran? Do they mean Russia?
Man.
And part of the point, I think, is to escalate for World War III. And some of these people, the Biden family's in this category. I'd put the Haley family in this category. When they pull the trigger, they ring the cash register for their own family. I mean, Joe Biden, I think his son, their family, sold off American foreign policy to make their family rich. It is not an accident that we're sending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to the very country that, figure this one out, made a multi-million-dollar bribe to the son of the president who had no business on Burisma's board. I mean, this guy's barely qualified to do an ordinary job in this country, let alone to serve on the board of a Ukrainian energy company where he has no expertise, paid $5 million. Is it an accident that when that same president or former vice president, now president, is sending hundreds of billions of dollars of our taxpayer money to that same country? It is not. And I don't care if it's of a Joe Biden version of this in the Democratic Party, a Nikki Haley version of this in the Republican Party, and it's symptomatic of other people in the Republican Party that have the same problem. That's not good for the United States of America. And believe me, a lot of people in the establishment media, in the super PAC class, in the donor class, I can't tell you the number of potential backers I've lost over just saying the things I just told you there in that last 60 seconds. But again, I'm not going to be somebody's circus monkey. On a personal level, I would rather lose the election than to win by playing some careful political snakes and ladders. But for the country, it's bad that the system works that way, because otherwise we're going to have somebody who's going to march us back into World War III, and I don't want to see that happen.
He just be dropping gems. He be
He
dropping
just-
bombs.
every time he talk,
he
bro.
just be
His
dropping.
He
campaign-
actually
off
spent a
truth.
lot and like pulled the mask back on a lot of politicians.
He
They
is-
warmongers because they make money from it. They're trying to make money.
I'm gonna be thinking.
They
So
own
of course they're gonna
military.
support.
I'm gonna be thinking
And
about that
They
shit.
said they tap dancing for they donors who can also get richer. So they just support the interest of their donors rather than the American people, which is it's understandable.
The internet.
That's like I'm like, hey.
Someone's literally paying for you to get in that
The street
position.
said he was gonna shoot you. You need a gun? I got one $4,000.
Yeah,
I go up to
basically.
him, hey, bro, up the street said he
That's
was
why
gonna
that
shoot you. I got a gun.
Israel-Palestine
You need
flag
one
that got
for
us selling that in New
$1,000.
York was a great analogy, bro.
Yeah.
It was
We got it if you need it or you need it.
supply and
I
demand.
can supply.
That's what all the companies do. They give to both sides, just in case whoever wins, so that they can leverage them to benefit themselves. Bet on both horses. That way you win either way. You got enough money.
I don't know how I feel about this, man. I don't know.
They just support the interests of those who put them in power. Someone bankrolled them to be in that position, so obviously they're gonna support that person.
God bless America.
Yeah, viewers, let us know what y'all
Jesus
think about
coming
this,
back.
guys. This is on Rumble.